In a quiet Milwaukee apartment, a man lived unnoticed, while something deeply disturbing remained hidden behind closed doors. One night, a stranger would step inside and walk back out with a story that shocked the world. When police finally looked inside, the evidence told a story no one was prepared to hear. Who was Jeffrey Dahmer, and how did he remain invisible for so long? Behind the headlines were real lives, stories that deserved to be remembered, not reduced to fear. Everything changed the moment one man decided not to stay. Inside, officers would find answers and even more questions. This is the story of a man who hid in plain sight, and the investigation that uncovered a nightmare beneath ordinary life. To understand what happened, we have to go back to where it all began. He didn't run at first, just walked faster, heart racing, certain something inside that apartment wasn't right. When he finally spoke to police, his words were fragmented, but enough to bring them back. The details sounded strange, almost unbelievable, yet the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. When officers knocked, the man inside opened the door without resistance. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, just another quiet apartment in a crowded building. But he pointed toward the bedroom, insisting something inside needed to be checked. The detective moved carefully, each step deliberate, sensing the room held more than it revealed. In that moment, everything changed. The case was no longer a suspicion, but a discovery. Behind them, the man stood still, quiet, detached, as if the moment meant nothing. The officers understood, without words, this was only the beginning of something far deeper. What they began documenting that night would unfold into one of the most disturbing investigations in modern American history. He didn't panic. He simply sat there, quiet, composed, and eerily detached. Every word, every answer mattered now, because the truth was beginning to surface piece by piece. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm, almost as if he were describing something ordinary. As the investigation expanded, patterns began to emerge, connections no one had seen before. Each missing person case, once separate, now seemed tied to a single, chilling thread. Files that once gathered dust were suddenly urgent again, demanding answers that had been overlooked. Behind the silence was a man who had lived among others, unnoticed, unchallenged, and completely hidden. The picture was becoming clearer, but also far more disturbing than anyone imagined. What started as a single report was now revealing a pattern that would shock an entire nation. The deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. This was no longer just a case. He spoke in a calm, almost distant way, detached from the weight of what he described. The details were difficult to process, forcing investigators to rethink everything they believed about the case. Each name, each face, reminded everyone that this story was about lives, not headlines. The timeline stretched further back than expected, revealing a history that had gone unnoticed. To the outside world, he had seemed ordinary, another face in the crowd. Interviews painted a picture of someone who blended in, never drawing the attention he now demanded. The city moved on as usual, unaware of what had been happening in its quiet corners. Standing there again, the weight of the discovery became impossible to ignore. The truth was no longer hidden, but understanding it would take much longer. By the time the investigation reached its end, the scale of the case had already reshaped public understanding of hidden crime. In custody, he remained the same, quiet, controlled, and detached from the gravity of everything around him. Reports were finalized, evidence cataloged, but the emotional weight of the case lingered far beyond paperwork. For families, the story never ended. It lived on in memory, in absence, in unanswered questions. What happened inside those walls would remain a reminder of how easily darkness can go unnoticed. He became a name known everywhere, but understanding him remained far more complex. The case closed, but its impact continued to echo long after the investigation ended. The city moved forward, but it would never forget what had been hidden within it. What allows someone to remain unseen for so long, even when they stand among us? In the end, the story isn't about fear. It's about remembering those who should never be forgotten. Some cases end on paper, but the questions they leave behind never really close, unnoticed, unchallenged, and completely hidden in plain sight. Beyond the headlines are real lives, stories that deserve to be remembered with dignity, not fear. What we understand today is only part of the story. The rest remains in the shadows. What do you think? How does something like this go unnoticed for so long? Share your thoughts below.